Hi, my name is Rebecca, and I will be talking about the book A Child Called It, Child Abuse, and tell you why and how we can prevent it from happening. Getting lost in a good book is very relaxing, and it can help us forget our troubles sometimes. Every book hopes to leave the reader with some sort of new perspective or a learned moral. A Child Called It by David Pelzer was very difficult to get through, but it actually helped me understand the abuse young children have to go through every day. This book influenced me not only to become a good mother when I'm older, but what I can do as a career to help kids who are going through the trouble, such as the main character. The main character, David, is a young boy who lives with his parents and two brothers. He explains that in the beginning of his childhood, everything was normal. His parents got along with each other, and he got along with them. His father would be gone a lot due to his job, but his mother would do the best that she can to help keep the family happy. She cleaned, and she cooked, and she took out the kids to play all the time. I guess the father, being away constantly, took a toll on his mother because she drastically changed. At first, she would punish her kids like normal parents would, by putting them in timeout. Later, she realized this was not working, and her kids were not living up to her expectations, so she needed to change the punishments. She began drinking alcohol a lot more, which skewed her thinking and changed her attitude for the worse. Gruesome punishments were her plan. She began favoring the two brothers and overlooking David. Because David was a bad boy in her eyes, she began punishing him in the most disgusting ways. She would smash his head against the mirror and make him repeat, "I'm a bad boy." She fed him only leftovers, such as the last few bites of his brother's cereal. She played awful games with him and would put a nice big meal in front of him and tell him he only had 5 seconds to eat it. She made him burn himself on the stove as a punishment. Not only did this disturb me, but what hurt my heart the most is that the school knew what was going on, but they did not do anything about it until a year later. After all of this, he still loved her. Maybe it's because he feared her, or because that it was his mother and he knew that he had to love her. It sickens me to know that this stuff goes on in real life. This is a true story. It's not just a book. Disgusting things like this happen all the time. This is not my favorite book because of what was happening, but because it influenced me to be a more caring person. This book was a big influence on helping me choose my career. I've always had a big heart, but this story latched onto my emotions and made me want to change the people in the world somehow. Children get abused every day and every minute. I did some research and I found that the National Children's Alliance that nearly 5 children die every day in America because of abuse and neglect. In 2008, about 1 out of every 601 children were victims of physical abuse, and 80% of the abusers were their parents. Some are too afraid to say something to their peers or authority figures, for fear that their parents will be upset with them. They love their parents and they don't want to get them in trouble. Children can be so young and naive. They don't understand the situation they're in, and they don't understand how dangerous it is. That's why they need our help. They're too scared to do anything about it, and honestly, we're the only ones that can help. Some children are so young that they cannot speak out for themselves. Some are too scared to speak out. A lot of people think that the most common form of child abuse is from strangers, but it's not. That's a myth. The abuse mainly comes from a person who's a part of the family or a person that the family trusts. There are many types of abuse. There's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, and neglect. Just imagine a poor, helpless child. Their parents call them bad names and beat them and punish them in awful ways. Young girls and boys getting sexually abused by a parent or a friend or a family member. Young boys being called stupid and beaten until there are visible bruises just because they accidentally broke or spilled something. Young girls are being hit for absolutely no reason, only because the father is drunk. Both girls and boys actually are equally likely to suffer from abuse, and it's not their fault. Maybe they did do something on accident, or maybe they did break something. But abusing them is not a way to help them learn in a healthy way. That damages a child. Children who grow up from an abusive family can grow up to be the same way. They could abuse the ones around them because they learned that from home. They could become bullies so that they feel pride. They could meet someone and then become a child abuser themselves. Child abuse just doesn't happen in bad neighborhoods or in poor families. It can even happen in good families. Some families are masters at covering it all up, and they can seem like the happiest family on the outside, but on the inside they're abusive and terrible. Another thing that could happen is that a child could grow up to be extremely timid and shy. They may not have any friends, or they may be too scared to make friends because they don't want anyone knowing what goes on at home. They're not used to the attention, and that's the way it stays. They feel ugly and helpless and stupid. They feel like nobody likes them. Their self-esteem can drop on all types of levels. They may be looking for a way out so that their parents won't get in trouble. They may look towards suicide, and they may fall into drugs and alcohol and drop out of school. The child may grow up to be completely opposite, though. They may be so hurt at home that they just need attention. They may talk your ear off or fish for compliments because they're not getting that at home. Their self-esteem could be so low, and that they also feel helpless or stupid, and they're just looking for love and attention from others. They could look for attention in the wrong places, though, such as drugs and alcohol, or maybe in a less criminal way, such as acting out in class. Abuse just doesn't happen to damage people emotionally, but it could damage a child mentally and physically. Physical abuse can really damage a child. If a child is constantly being hit in the head, that could damage their brain, and that affects their everyday life. That affects their personality as well as their thought processes and abilities. Imagine a child being beaten so bad that they become mentally challenged. Nobody deserves that. A way to help children who are being abused is to learn the signs. If children don't seem to be too attached to the parent or the caregiver, or they're excessively withdrawn or fearful about doing something wrong, or act inappropriately, such as throwing tantrums even though they're too old, or show extremes in behavior such as extremely demanding or aggressive, that could mean that they're being emotionally abused. If children have clothes that are too small or too large, or dirty and torn, or inappropriate for the weather, or their hygiene is constantly bad, or they're sick and have physical injuries, they're frequently unsupervised, or late or missing from school, or left after school for a while, that could mean they're being neglected. If children have unexplained injuries or bruises, or they're always on alert for something bad to happen, or their injuries appear to have a pattern such as from a belt, or they don't want hugs, or they flinch at sudden movements or touch, they're afraid to go home, or they wear inappropriate clothing such as long sleeves to cover up scars even though it's summertime, that could mean they're being physically abused. If you notice any of these signs, there are a ton of organizations to report child abuse to. CAPA, which is Child Abuse Prevention Association. Their job is to prevent child abuse, and they have treatment services for the child and their family. They raise awareness and they help people understand what they can do to help. You could also contact the DSCYF, which is the Department of Services for Children, Youth, and their families. They'll do something about it. We just need to make the first move. We need to step up and prevent child abuse from happening. No child needs to go through that. They need to be loved, and they need to be in a caring family. There are so many signs to child abuse, and if you notice any of these, it doesn't necessarily mean it's happening, but you should definitely look more into it. What are you going to be able to do about it? Why should you help? Put yourself in that position. You could join an organization or report the signs that you just learned to an organization. Taking the first step and reporting it is such a huge help. Would you want to go through that? Would you want your son or your niece or the child down the street to go through that? Children really need our help because they're too frightened to say a word. Some aren't even able to say a word. If you see the signs, you can save a child's life by reporting or helping them get out of an abusive relationship with their family. Yes, it will be upsetting taking away a child from their family, but their life is seriously at risk, and it needs to be done before it's too late.